Hello. uh, I'd like to, first of all, uh, I want to start with a smudge first, and then I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll be doing some sharing with you. And I have sage here that I'm going to be burning, and I got to find my matches. There. So I got some matches here. And the reason why I'm smudging is because what I'm going to be sharing with you is my story, and I need to stay focused. I need energy before I share, and I just want to cleanse my area here, and then also I'll smudge for use so that you're taken care of too as well. Okay. I don't know if any of you smudged before, but when you smudge, it's a cleansing, and you can see the smoke. I have my sage here, so it's gonna be burning. It's burning. It's ready. So when I smudge, I usually like to smudge my head, just for my thoughts and so that I think in a good way. Smudge my eyes so I see good things. Smudge my mouth so that I speak in a good way. And then my ears so that I hear. And then that you hear me as well and listen. So I smudge my body here. It's nice. And just smudge some items here. I have my eagle feather. And I have some stuff I'm going to be sharing with you, my resources. So smudge all of them. There. Okay, so I want to introduce myself. My English name is Geraldine Shingoose. And I go by Jerry. People call me Jerry. And I have spirit names. I want to acknowledge my spirit names. My spirit names are Sky Woman and Northern Lights Woman. Kijikishkweo, that's Sky Woman. And Weiwei Ta Koi is Northern Lights Woman. Makwanodam, that's I come from the Bear Clan. And my warrior spirit is Grandmother Turtle. So I'm an Indigenous grandmother here in Winnipeg. I offer a lot of support to the community as an Indigenous grandmother, and I get called lots, and I got called today to share my story. Christine's invited me to your class to speak today, and I'm very honored to come again and speak to her class. I remember, I think this is probably the fourth year that I'm sharing with the students. So, but I remember going to the University of Winnipeg, and it was in the open setting there, and I was speaking to the crowd. So with COVID now, we have to follow our public orders and keep safe. And so I'm doing my presentation by video, and I'm here today to share with you. I'm a residential school survivor. I attended Muscowequan Residential School in Saskatchewan, and it's between Listock and Punishai, Saskatchewan. And the school's still standing now. Like it's people can see it when they drive by. So I'm going to be sending Christine pictures so that you could see the school that I attended, and I hope that in my story I'll be sharing parts about that school. Okay. I attended Muscowequan Residential School with my siblings, Darlene and George and Connie. George attended 11 years and Darlene attended 10 years. And I attended 9 years and Connie attended 1 year. Yeah, so I have here with me, present with me is a brick. It's it's a brick from Muscowequan Residential School. So I went to visit the school in 2013, 2016, 2018, 2019, and 2020. So I'll probably try and head back there again this year, 2021. And the reason why I go back there is I'll share later on why I go back there, but also it helps me, and it helps me with my understanding of my attendance and my experience at residential school. Okay. So I attended Muscowequan Residential School for 10 months out of the year, from September to June. We went home at the end of June, the beginning of July. We were home for 2 months and then we'd go back. So I attended from 1962 to 1971. And there were other students that were able to go home for holidays like spring break and Christmas break. And yeah, so, but I wasn't able to because where I lived was far. So today I'm going to share 3 things with you. The first one is I'll be sharing is life before residential school. The second one is life during residential school. And then the third is life after residential school. Okay, and that's what I share in my presentation. So I want to welcome each one of you for listening, and you're going to be witness to my story. And I understand that all of you have been learning about the history of the residential schools, and hearing stories and watching videos. So there's a lot of resources out there. And it's really important that the schools listen to the survivors, eh? So the survivors' stories are very real, and my story is very real. So the story I'm going to be sharing today is my story, but you'll also hear experiences of other residential school survivors. You probably heard some of the stories already, and we could relate to each other as survivors on what happened in residential school. Muscowequan was a Catholic-run residential school. It was run by the priest and the brothers and nuns, and we were there. They were there to run the school. The federal government got the churches to run the schools: the Catholic Church, the United Church, the Anglican Church to run the schools. So it was later on uh, at the end when they brought in regular people to come in and run the schools. So I'll begin. So life before residential school was very, very sacred, very dear to me, and I cherish my memories before residential school. And the reason why I cherish those memories is because I was with my parents. I was with my kukum. Hey, my parents' names are Henry and Eva Shingus, and my kukum was Annie Paul. That was my dad's mother. So we were living in northern Saskatchewan, uh, outside of Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan. We were living in a bush, and that's where my dad worked. He worked in a bush camp, and my mom helped cook, like, in the camp. And my cookum, she took care of us. So it was a beautiful time. I really, I smile because I'm just remembering all those memories of being in the bush and growing up there. So I didn't know any English. We always spoke was Soto, and my cookum would take us out on the land, and she'd uh, get us to pick medicines. We had to get our own water because there's no electricity, there's no running water. So we would go out and get all those things. And at night we'd have our lamp and we'd have our candle. And sometimes we made our own candle. My cookum showed me how to do that. So you just put it like on a plate, and you have some grease, and then you have a cloth, and you light the end of that cloth, and it burns. Like, the cloth absorbs the grease, and yeah, it was a homemade candle that we used. But I remember her taking us out on the land, and we would pick medicines. And she would make us pick medicines, me and my sister, because she told us we were pure. So we were pure, and we were, uh, at that time, I didn't know what pure was, but so we picked them for her. And so later on in life, I was thinking, I wonder why she said that. She probably said that just because she wanted us to pick all the medicines, and she didn't have to do anything. Yeah. So she uh she got us to pick the medicines. But there are medicines that you have to pick, like little girls pick, because they're pure. So those were the teachings she was teaching us. And yeah, it was a good time. But I remember this time she was walking down this path, and we were following behind her, eh? Like I was walking behind her there, and she's walking, and all of a sudden she sees this something, and she stops. Like, like that. And then I'm behind her, and I bang into her, and then I look, around the corner around her there, and I'm looking, and I see a bear. There's a bear there standing in front of my cookum. And so going like this, looking at the bear, peeking around grandma, and but that bear is going like this, eh? And then, but my cookum, she's talking to the bear, and she's telling him to go away in our language, eh? She's got her grandchildren with her, and she's asking the bear to go, to leave. because she wants to keep her grandchildren safe, eh? So she asked him to go. She Muscowequan, like like she's talking to the great spirit of the bear in front of her, and she's asking him to leave. So, but I'm going like this, and the bear sees me. That's why he's going like this, eh? So she ended up convincing him to leave, and so he finally went on his way, and so that was like our indigenous people. We have like, the four-legged out there. They're our relatives, and we have that communication with them, and we're able to speak to them. And that's what my kokum done, was she was able to speak to the bear. So that was quite an experience. And then one of the things that I like doing when we were out there was my kokum should make me little dresses, like uh, pull-on dresses, and they were so cute, and they were handmade. And then I remember I used to like eating grease. I don't know why. Grease is not good for you, but I used to like eating grease. I used to like sucking on it, and then but when I was sucking on it, it would leak down and onto my dress, and I didn't want to get into trouble. So what I would do is I would go to the clothesline, and I would take down a clean dress and put it on, and take the dirty one, like, and then I would go put it in, because we had sawdust piles. So I would go dig a hole in the sawdust pile, and I'd put the dress in there and cover it up, like. So, but it got to be, my kokum was, and my mom were wondering where all my dresses were. They couldn't find any of my dresses. So, and then they went looking around, and they went to the sawdust pile, and they seen these little humps. And then in the humps, they opened it up. They seen my dresses in there, and they were able to retrieve all my dresses that I hid. And yeah, it was a fun time. So don't ever eat grease, because it'll get all over your clothes. So yeah, yeah, it was. And then my dad, he'd keep us warm in the cabin that we stayed. We had a wood stove, and oh my God, sometimes it'd be so hot, like, I couldn't breathe, and it was. So I ended up with asthma when I was small, and any kind of heat would bother me. Like even now, like I like my window open. I like the fan. I like keeping my temperature cold in my room. So they ended up, my kokum ended up getting medicine for me for my asthma. And ever since then, like I never had any symptoms of asthma, or like that medicine that I took care of my asthma at that time. Yeah, so one of the things my dad told me was, later on in life, was, my girl, he said, because he gave me a responsibility, he gave me a pipe, and he told me that I was going to do the sweat lodges, do ceremonies. So he said when I was about 4 years old in the bush camp, I guess the wolf came to him and told him that he had to teach me the old ways, those teachings, those sacred teachings, and because I was gonna help people in the future. So he uh, he was able to do that for me. So, but I'll share that later. So I remember this one day there was a vehicle that pulled up, like outside, but behind that vehicle there was a police car too as well. And that vehicle, it was a black Chevy vehicle. I remember. I never seen anything like it before, but like that's what it was. And there was a man that got out of the vehicle and he wore a black robe, like it was looked like a dress, and he had a cross, a big cross, like one of those crosses hanging from his black robe. And him and the police were behind him, and they're talking to my kookum and my mom. My dad was out in the bush, and so they didn't ask, they, I guess, basically told my mom and dad that they were taking us. So my mom and my kookum came and got me, Darlene, and George, and they got us to go into the vehicle. So we got in the vehicle. I never been in any vehicle like that before. It was I got in the back. I got in the middle. Darlene and George was on this side, and we leave. But I feel a sadness because I see my mom and my kookum standing there. We're driving away. Yeah. So what happened next was we drove for miles and miles, because from Hudson Bay to Listock is quite a distance. So we're driving, and I see the trees, see the waters. Like, I've never been in a car like that. Like, I thought it was pretty cool, like, as a little girl. But I look at Darlene and I look at George, and both of them have their head down. And I'm wondering why, like, why their heads are down. So later on in life, like I came to understand why their heads were down. It's because they went before, they were picked up before. Darlene and George were picked up before, and they knew they were going back to the residential school. So they already knew. But in me, I didn't know what was going on. So just looking in the car, just like, a happy little girl, and we're driving on, and then we pull up in front of the school, and they get us out. We go into the building. When you go up the steps, like, there's the administration office, and the principal's office is there, and the principal's office is the priest, father, Father Royale. That was his name. But in the hallway, when we come in, there's these men dressed in black robes and the crosses, and we see women too as well, dressed in black and white dresses. Like they have a veil over their head, and them too, they have like a rosary crosses, like under around their. You could see them. So they're standing there, and they take George, and he goes to the left. They go down the hallway, and then the brothers take George. The nuns take me and Darlene, and we go to that side. So I don't know if you guys know about residential schools. They had a boys' side and they had a girls' side. Okay, so they had the classroom for the boys, they had the classroom for the girls, but they also had dormitories. So on the second floor was the senior boys dormitory, senior girls dormitory. But above that was the little boys' dormitory and then the little girls' dormitory. So that's where they were taking us. So they took me and Darlene down the hallway and we went to the stairway. And when I'm in the stairway, when we get there, there's children crying. I could hear children crying. I could hear children screaming. And we're in this lineup. We're at the bottom of the lineup. The lineup's going up the stairway. So I could hear the children. I never heard anything like that before. And it just touched me. Like, I was going, oh, like, I wanted to comfort them. So I was asking Darlene, like, what's going on, Darlene? How come all these kids are crying? But I'm speaking in my language, eh? And she's telling me, she's going, shh, shh. And my name was Dangados. She said, Dangados. Like, so I had to be quiet. And I continued to talk in my language. And then she's trying to keep me quiet. And then the woman in the black and white, she comes up to me. She's a fairly big woman. And she's yelling at me in this language that I never heard before. And she's going, and I continue to talk in my Soto language, and she hits me. But when she hit me, it hit me hard, eh? Like, so I started crying too as well. So it kind of helped me realize why the kids were crying and screaming. Darlene was trying to comfort me and keep me quiet, eh? So we'll make our way up the stairs, and I made my way up the stairs, and there was some nuns up there, and they were cutting hair and getting children to sit down in a chair. And then they cut my bangs, and they cut my hair. Like, I got long hair here. They cut all that off. Like, it was really short bangs. And they took all my clothes that my kokum and my mum had me wear to come to the school, my little dress. And then they got us to go in a shower, and we showered. There's a lot of girls in the showers too as well. And they gave me this bar of soap, and the bar of soap something like this. And the bar of soap sunlight soap. And I had to wash my hair with it and my body. Come out of the shower, they gave me clothes. And then they showed me to an area, like all the, like I could see rows and rows and rows of beds in that little dormitory. It wasn't it was a little girls' dormitory, but it was a big dormitory. And I had a bed by the window, like looking out at the road that came into the school. And they put Darlene way over there on the other side. So when my brother was taken and Darlene was over there way on the other side, they never allowed siblings to talk in residential school. They didn't let us talk. I couldn't talk to George. I couldn't talk to Darlene. And later on, I couldn't talk to Connie. So one of my memories of Connie is she was a little girl, like a little. She was 6 years younger than I was, so I was one of the girls and going into the senior dormitory. But anyways, when she came, Connie was a picky eater. She didn't like eating certain foods, and my mom always took care of her. Whatever she wanted to eat, she'd give to her. So I remember this time I was um, at the cafeteria door, and through the cafeteria door, you could see a window. And I was looking through that window, and I could see Connie sitting. She was the only student left in the cafeteria, and she was sitting there at the table and she was eating. But I remember, like, a certain food she didn't like, she would throw up. So what they did, as I'm looking through the doorway, is there's a nun standing beside her, and they're making her eat that food. And I felt so helpless. I couldn't help her. And she threw up, and they're making her eat her her puke. I so wanted to go in there and take her and hold her, and I couldn't. See, that's how much power they had. So that was one experience that really stays home with me. Is I wanted to protect my little sister from that. I did everything that I could to protect her. I watched over her. I tried to. But that one incident, I couldn't protect her. And you guys heard that there's the stories of residential school, the punishment. The guy spoke my language when I went into the school. When I came out of residential school, I didn't speak my language because every time you spoke your language, you would get a strap with a belt or a ruler. It was almost like your language was beaten out of you. I didn't choose English. English was beaten into me. So that was the physical abuse that happened to us. They took our language away. There was mental and psychological abuse where they told us that we were called us names. Like, they called us dirty Indian. You're gonna go to hell. You're a sinner. You're ugly. You're drunk. You're a squaw. All those name callings, like each day. So when you hear that for 9 years, like it impacted on my self-esteem. Yeah. So whatever messages a child hears, they internalize it, and I internalized those messages. So when I came out of residential school, I didn't have any self-esteem. I was a beautiful young girl. But I didn't know it. I didn't see myself as that. I just seen myself as a dirty, ugly Indian girl, because that's what they told me I was. And I remember this one incident we had a great grade 3 teacher. I'm just going to touch a little bit on it because it's important. So one of the things that my grade 3 teacher would do is he would walk up and down the aisles, eh? And he had like a suit jacket, tie, and glasses, bald hair. And he would walk around like, up and down the aisles. So once in a while, every once in a while, like he would hit the children in the head. And I remember he did that to me. He'd hit me in the head, like, and then I could hear a ringing sound in my head. When you get hit in the ear or any blow to the ear is a ringing sound. But if you cried, he would hit you again. And if you cried again, he would hit you or punch you. And that was randomly, like every day in the grade 3 class. So come um, June, the end of June, when we went home for the summer, like, we are so happy because I was going home, but I was also leaving him. So we come home, we come back to the residential school, and I find out that he failed all of us, all the grade 3 class. And he continued to do what he did the year prior. Every randomly, he just hit a student, punch, hit. And I come to learn not to cry because if I cried, then I would get hit more. So I had to keep it inside. And it was literally really hard to do that. But for 2 years, he did that. And part of my physical abuse with the IAP, the independent assessment process for the residential school survivors of the abuses that occurred in residential school. We had to let the government know what happened to us. So that was part of what happened to me. Was my hearing was impacted. I lost my hearing. I wear hearing aids today because of the impact and the blows to my head from that teacher. So that was the physical abuse, and the spiritual abuse was taking my language away, taking me away from my parents and my grandparents, because we have a sacred connection with our parents when we come into this world. So by taking the kids away or taking me away from my parents, they broke that sacred bond between me and my parents for 9 years. So that was the spiritual abuse. They forced us to learn Catholicism. We had to pray as they prayed. So it was excuse me. It was a difficult time. Also, I remember learning Latin. We had to learn Latin when we first started the residential school because they didn't do the services in English back then. So they did it in Latin. So we had to pray and sing in Latin. So that was my experience in residential school. And so when I came out of residential school, life wasn't good. Things changed. Things changed for the residential school survivors when they went home to their families. My mom, she, I guess if you guys think about it, like, think about my mom losing her children for 10 years and then we come back after all those years. She didn't know how to cope with the loss of her children, so she started and drinking, and she became an alcoholic. And that's what all she knew was when I came out of residential school was that. So we were taken from her and placed into foster homes. I ran away from 16 foster homes and stayed in foster care till I turned into an adult. But I always ran away from those homes. That's why there's so many homes, 16 foster homes. I ran away and I always went back to my mom. I ran away and always went back to her because you just want to be home, eh? So basically, from the age of 1962 to when I turned 18, I always wanted to be home. So that was taken from me. I became a mom early at 20 years old. I have three children, Billy, Joe, Teresa, and Manny. And when I was 29 years old, I decided I wanted to get my education. So I went to university and I went and I got my Bachelor of Social Work, and I graduated and became a social worker for probably over 35 years, 40 years. Yeah. So I'm retired now. I but one of the things that really helped me connect with, remember I told you I had low self-esteem? I connected with my dad. And my dad, remember I told you he carried teachings. He was a medicine man. He carried a sacred bundle. And with that sacred bundle came teachings and ceremony. So I started learning from him at when I was 29 years old. When I went to the university, I connected with him, and our relationship grew from there. And sadly to say, my mom passed away in 2008, and she died from liver of the cirrhosis. So my mom was self-medicating what she lost. It's like, that trauma of losing her children. But my reconnection with my dad helped me to find my identity as Anishinaabekwe, as an Soto woman, and connected me with the teachings, or the indigenous teachings are so beautiful. Like, the seven sacred teachings, and going to the ceremonies helped me. I went to sweat lodges. I went to see elders, not just my dad. I travel far for my own healing so that I can connect with who I was, my identity, because that's what residential school did to me. Was they tried to take my identity away from me as a Anishinaabe and as an indigenous woman. So it was that journey to healing is hard because there's a lot of releasing, a lot of crying, a lot of connecting, but you connect with your loved ones, your family. So my children They didn't know about my residential school till later on in life. I always gave them the PG version of residential school, the parental guidance version. But later on, like now they know the truth. Now they know the reality of my experience. They know that they're intergenerational uh, residential school survivors too, as well. And my grandchildren are also third intergenerational survivors. My great grandchildren are fourth intergenerational survivors. So I just want to say that the federal government was not successful in killing the child in me, the Indian child in me. They were not successful in assimilating me. They weren't successful in colonizing me because I'm proud. I'm a proud Indigenous grandmother today. I do a lot for the community. I sing, I do ceremonies, I do pipe ceremonies, and sometimes I do sweat lodge ceremonies. But I also share my story, and I shared my story with St. James Assiniboine School Division in that area. So these students, grade eights, they put this book together, and this book is has letters from each student, and they were given an assignment to write to somebody important to them and to tell them about what they learned about residential schools. And it just beautiful, all these beautiful letters. They tell the truth about what happened in residential school. And in it, they talk about the children that died in residential school. So in Muscowequan, they found 19 graves in 1983, unmarked graves. And then in June 21st, 2019, yeah, or 2000, yeah, 2019, June 21st, they found there's probably about 35 to 40 unmarked burial sites around Muscowequan Residential School. So remember I told you I go back each year. So I go back each year to do ceremony, but also to feast those little ones. Um, by meaning feast as I give them spirit dish. Hey, so the spirit dish that I give is I give bubble gum because we like bubble gum in residential school. Sponge toffee. Give them hot dogs because we liked our hot dogs in residential school. And we also liked our chips. So I make a little spirit dish and I go put it out there by the school. So if you ever want to Google it, Muscowequan Residential School, uh, APTN did a story about it. Um, there's it's there's videos out there about my school. So, but I'll be sending pictures to Christine about my school, and I just want to say thank you to each one of you for giving me this opportunity today, and then now you're witness to my story. I ask of two things from you. The first one is I ask that you share my story, and the second one is I ask you to do more research about residential schools and to continue to share our stories. because there's not too many of us survivors left. Uh, we're going to be passing on soon. There's probably maybe 50,000, 60,000 of us left in Canada. So I ask that you share that history because it's our truth. And I say chimigwech to each one of you for listening to my story. Okay? So thank you. Thank you, Christine, for inviting me. I go say thank you.